AITA for refusing to sell the land my father's business sits on, effectively blocking my brother from his inheritance, because he wants to sell it to a developer? I, 46M, need to get this out because my wife is trying to remain neutral, and I feel like I'm losing my goddamn mind. Background: my dad started a custom cabinetry and restoration shop in the 80s. I started sweeping floors there when I was 12. By 20, I was running crews. By 30, I was essentially running the entire operation. Dad was the face of the company, I was the hands. My younger brother, let's call him Greg, 41M, never gave a shit about sawdust or lacquer. He was the smart one. He went to college, got a marketing degree, moved to the city, and bounced around 5 different startups that all went nowhere. Dad died 2 months ago. It was a massive stroke. It was quick, which is a mercy, I guess, but it left everything in absolute chaos. Mom passed 5 years ago, so it was just the two of us left. Here is where it gets messy. Dad's will was written 10 years ago. It splits the residuary estate 50-50 between me and Greg. However, it explicitly leaves the business entity, the LLC, the tools, the contracts, and the accounts, entirely to me. I own the business. But the land and the building the shop sits on? That was in Dad's name personally. It falls into the residuary estate. So, I own the business, but Greg and I now co-own the building my business operates out of. Greg showed up for the funeral in a suit that cost more than my truck, acting like the grieving son of the century. He cried the loudest, shook every hand, and told everyone how much we were going to miss him. I kept my mouth shut. I was too busy trying to keep the shop running so our 15 employees didn't lose their paychecks while I was burying my father. 2 days after the funeral, we're sitting in Dad's kitchen. I'm exhausted. I'm drinking a beer at 11 a.m. because I can. Greg pulls out a folder. It wasn't a photo album, it was a folder full of spreadsheets. Mike, he says, I've been looking at the comps. The land value here has skyrocketed. Developers are buying up the whole industrial park for condos. I stared at him. Greg, the body isn't even cold. And that's the shop. That's my livelihood. That's the guy's jobs. He gave me this condescending look. I know, but the business isn't tied to the location, right? You could move it. Rent a cheaper space out in the county. If we sell the lot, we're looking at $1.2 million. That's $600,000 each, Mike. Cash. I told him to fuck off. I explained that moving the shop would cost me hundreds of thousands in rigging, ventilation, permitting, and downtime. It would kill the business. I told him I'd buy him out over time. I even offered him rent. He refused. He wants the lump sum, and he wants it now. Turns out, Greg is in deep shit. He's got gambling debts or investment debts, I don't know which, but he's desperate. He told me yesterday that if I don't agree to list the property, he's going to petition the court for a petition by sale, which would force an auction of the building. I lost it. I screamed at him that he's a vulture. I told him he never put a single drop of sweat into that building and he has no right to strip mine Dad's legacy just because he's bad with money. He called me a selfish prick who is hoarding the inheritance and holding his future hostage. He says I'm legally preventing him from accessing his father's gift. My wife says I should just take a loan against the business to buy him out, but interest rates are insane and the business runs on thin margins as it is. A loan that size would cripple me. So, AITA for refusing to sell and telling my brother to get bent, even if it means we go to court? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I posted, and things have gone from bad to holy shit. Thanks for the comments. Most of you said I needed a lawyer yesterday. I got one, a guy named Henderson who looks like a bulldog and charges like one. I explained the situation regarding the partition sale threat. Henderson told me that while Greg can force a sale, it takes time, and we can argue that the property can be physically divided or that I have a right of first refusal. It's not a slam dunk for Greg, but it's going to be a massive headache. But that's not even the crazy part. Since the house is also part of the estate, 50-50, Greg decided he has a right to stay there to save on rent while we settle things. I couldn't legally stop him. I live 20 minutes away with my wife and kids, so Dad's house was sitting empty anyway. I didn't like it, but I figured it would be easier to keep an eye on him if he was close. That was a big mistake. I went over there last Tuesday to pick up some of Dad's old tax documents for the probate lawyer. I have a key, obviously. I didn't knock because, well, it's my house too. I walked into a whirlwind. The place was trashed. Not messy bachelor trashed, I mean looted. Drawers were pulled out and dumped on the floor. The wall safe in the study, which I knew was empty because Dad moved his bonds years ago, was hanging open. Dad's office looked like a bomb went off. I found Greg in the living room, surrounded by boxes. He wasn't packing up Dad's clothes for charity. He was sorting things. Expensive things. Dad's coin collection. The vintage watches. The silver set Mom got for her wedding. "What the fuck are you doing?" I asked. My voice was shaking. Greg jumped about a foot in the air. He looked hungover, sweaty, and manic. I'm doing inventory. For the estate. We need to know what we have, Mike." "You're putting the silver in a duffel bag, Greg. That's not inventory. That's theft." He stood up, getting right in my face. "It's not theft if it's mine. Half of this is mine. I'm just taking my share now so we don't have to wait for your slow-ass lawyers." "You don't get to pick and choose," I yelled. "It has to be appraised. You're stealing from the estate." We got into a shoving match. He's softer than me, but he's desperate. He shoved me back into the hallway table, knocking over a vase. I grabbed him by the collar and pinned him against the wall. I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to hit him so bad. I could smell the stale booze on his breath. "Get out," I said. "Get out of the house." "I live here," he spat back. "I'm calling the cops," I told him. "I'm calling the cops and reporting a burglary in progress. You want that? You want them to look at your record?" I was bluffing. I didn't know if he had a record. But the color drained from his face instantly. He grabbed the duffel bag. I ripped it out of his hand. "Leave the bag." He glared at me with pure hatred. "You always thought you were better than me because you stayed in this podunk town and kissed Dad's ass." "I stayed and wiped his ass while he was dying, Greg. Where were you?" He stormed out. I locked the door and changed the alarm code immediately. I spent the next 4 hours going through the house. He had ransacked everything. But here is the kicker. I went down to the basement. Dad had a workshop down there, just a small bench for tinkering. Greg obviously hadn't bothered to look there, it was just old tools and dust. I sat down on Dad's old stool, just trying to breathe and stop my hands from shaking. I was looking at the pegboard, at the outlines of hammers and wrenches Dad had drawn so he'd know where they went. I noticed one of the jars of nails was sitting on a folded piece of paper. Dad was meticulous, he wouldn't leave paper under a jar. I unfolded it. It wasn't a formal legal document. It was a handwritten ledger in Dad's blocky, all-caps handwriting. It was titled, "Gregory, Loans and Advances." I started reading. The dates went back 15 years. 2008, rent assistance, $4,000. 2010, car payoff, $12,000. 2012, business investment, $25,000. 2015, bail/lawyer, DUI, $15,000. It went on and on. Page after page. I did a quick mental tally. It was over $200,000. And at the very bottom, in red ink, Dad had written, "To be deducted from inheritance share if not repaid by time of death." I felt a cold chill. Dad never told me. He never told me he was funding Greg's life to this extent. He kept the peace by keeping secrets. I took a picture of the ledger and sent it to Henderson. Then I called Greg. "I found the book, Greg," I said when he answered. Silence. Long, heavy silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his voice cracked. "The ledger. The loans. $200,000, Greg. Plus interest? You don't have a share of the house. You spent it already. That's not legal." He screamed. "That's just scribbles. It's not notarized." "We'll see what the judge thinks," I said. "Bring the keys back. Now." He hung up. I thought that was the turning point. I thought I had him. But I underestimated how slimy he could get. Yesterday, I got served. Not for a partition sale. Greg is suing me for elder abuse and undue influence. His claim? That I manipulated our senile father into writing the business over to me and forged the debt ledger to cut Greg out. He's claiming Dad wasn't of sound mind when he wrote the will or the ledger, and that I controlled his finances and stole from him. He's demanding a forensic audit of the business, which will cost me thousands and freeze my accounts, and he wants the entire estate frozen until trial. I'm looking at the papers, and I see the lawyer he hired. It's not a local guy. It's a shark from the city who works on contingency. I'm sitting here in the dark in my dad's basement, realizing my brother isn't just a screw-up. He's trying to destroy me. And I just found something else in the basement. Behind the water heater, taped to the back of the insulation. A frantic note from Dad, dated 2 weeks before he died. It just says, "If Greg finds out about the insurance policy, Don't let him have it. He didn't kill me, but he might as well have. I have no idea what insurance policy he's talking about. But I think I'm about to find out exactly how deep this rot goes. Update 2. It's been a month since the last update. I wish I could say things have settled down, but my life has turned into a bad cable TV drama. First off, the elder abuse lawsuit is real. Greg's lawyer managed to get a temporary injunction freezing the estate's assets. That means I can't touch the operating capital for the business if it flows through any account linked to Dad's name, which, stupidly, some of the old vendor accounts were. I've been paying for lumber and hardware out of my personal savings just to keep the guys working. My wife is stressed to the breaking point. She's looking at our dwindling savings and asking if this is the hill I want to die on. I told her it's not just a hill, it's the mountain my father built. Now, about that note behind the water heater. I showed it to Henderson. He looked grim. He told me that insurance policy could mean anything, but we needed to find it before Greg's forensic accountants did. If it's an asset, they'll want to liquidate it. I tore the house apart again. This time I wasn't looking for theft, I was looking for paper. I found it taped to the bottom of a drawer in the file cabinet, the one place Greg hadn't dumped out because he thought it was just empty hanging folders. It was a whole life policy. Face value, $500,000. Cash value, significant. But here is the kicker. 2 weeks before he died, the same time he wrote that note, Dad submitted a change of beneficiary form. Originally, the primary beneficiaries were me and Greg, 50-50. The new form? It names a trust. The Miller Grandchildren Trust. Dad cut both of us out. He left the money to my 2 kids, 14 and 10. Greg has no kids. I realized then why Dad hid it. If Greg knew that $500,000 had just slipped through his fingers, he would have gone nuclear. But there was more. I finally got access to Dad's cell phone records. I had the physical phone, but I didn't have the passcode. Henderson got a court order to access the provider data to defend against the undue influence claim. We wanted to prove Dad was conducting business as usual. We got the logs back last week. On the morning Dad died, between 6 a.m. and 8:15 a.m., the estimated time of his stroke, he received 19 calls from Greg. 19. And there were text messages. 7:02 a.m., you selfish old fuck. Pick up. 7:15 a.m., I know you changed the policy. The agent called me back. You can't do that. 7:30 a.m., you owe me that money. I'm in deep. If you don't fix this today, I'm coming down there and I'm burning the shop down. 7:45 a.m., change IT back. 8 a.m., I hope you rot. Dad died around 8:15. I sat in Henderson's office reading these transcripts, and I felt like I was going to throw up. Greg knew. He knew about the policy change. He harassed Dad into a stroke. That's what Dad meant by he didn't kill me, but he might as well have. Henderson looked at me and said, "This changes everything. This isn't just a defense against the lawsuit. This is ammunition for a counterclaim for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and possibly grounds to disinherit him entirely under the Slayer rule if we can prove the stress caused the stroke." I went home and told my wife. She cried. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. I called Greg. I shouldn't have, but I did. I saw the texts, Greg, I said. What texts? He played dumb. The morning he died. You threatened to burn the shop down. You harassed him to death over an insurance policy. You illegally accessed his phone. He shrieked. That's inadmissible. My lawyer has the carrier records, you dumbass. It's over. Drop the suit, or I show everyone. I show the judge, I show the family, I show everyone that you bullied our father into his grave. He hung up. But he didn't drop the suit. Instead, things got physical. Update 3. 3 days after I confronted Greg about the texts, I showed up to the shop at 6:30 a.m. to open up. The front glass door was smashed. My heart dropped. I ran inside, expecting the tools to be gone. The CNC machine, the saws, the expensive hand tools, all there. But the office was destroyed. Computers smashed. Filing cabinets tipped over. And, this is the part that broke me, someone had taken a gallon of black lacquer and poured it over Dad's old drafting table. The one he designed his first cabinets on. The one I refused to move even though we use CAD now. It was ruined. I knew who did it. There was no forced entry on the back gate, which means someone had a key or knew the code. Greg had both. I called the police. They came, took a report, and looked at the damage. I told them about the dispute with my brother. They nodded and said it was civil unless I had video proof. I didn't have cameras inside the office, I do now, only on the loading dock. I checked the dock footage. At 2 a.m., a figure in a hoodie walks past the camera. He's holding a crowbar. He's walking with a distinctive limp. Greg twisted his ankle playing pickup basketball a month ago and has been whining about it since. It wasn't enough for a definitive ID, but I knew. I sent the footage to Henderson. We had a hearing yesterday. I saw Greg for the first time since the house incident. He looked terrible. Gaunt, shaking. His fancy city lawyer looked less confident than before. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd seen enough family bullshit to last a lifetime, reviewed the texts. She looked over her glasses at Greg. "Mr. Miller, did you send these messages to your father on the morning of his death?" Greg's lawyer tried to object. The judge shut him down. "It's a simple question. Did he send them?" Greg stood up. "He stole my inheritance. He manipulated him." "Sit down," the judge barked. She turned to me. "Sir, the threats regarding burning down the shop. Do you believe your brother is a danger to the business?" "Your Honor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He poured lacquer on my father's drafting table yesterday. He's desperate and he's dangerous." The judge granted the restraining order. She also ordered a psychiatric evaluation for Greg before the civil suit could proceed. But the real blow came when she addressed the elder abuse claim. She stated that the text messages heavily implied that the father was making his own financial decisions, changing the policy, and that Greg was the one attempting to exert undue influence through coercion. She didn't dismiss the case right there. Legal wheels turn slow, but she lifted the freeze on the business accounts so I could pay my guys. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I'd won a battle but was losing the war. Greg shouted at me in the hallway, "You think you won? I have guys coming for me, Mike. If I don't get that money, I'm dead. You're killing your own brother." I stopped. I looked at him. "You're $200,000 in the hole to Dad, and God knows how much to whoever you owe now. I offered to help you before you sued me. I offered to buy you out over time. You spat in my face. I need it all right now." He screamed as the bailiff pulled him away. I went back to the shop. The guys helped me strip the lacquer off the drafting table. We couldn't save the finish, but the wood is still good. We sanded it down. It looks raw now. Like me. Update 4. It's over. And not in the way I expected. 2 days after the court hearing, I got a call at 3 a.m. It was the police. Greg was in the hospital. Apparently, the guys he owed money to weren't imaginary. He was beaten within an inch of his life outside his apartment in the city. Broken ribs, shattered orbital, internal bleeding. I drove to the hospital. My wife told me not to go, but he's my brother. Even after everything, he's my brother. He was in ICU, hooked up to tubes. He looked small. The police were there. They wanted to know if I knew who did this. I told them about his gambling debts, what little I knew. They took notes. When Greg woke up a day later, I was in the chair in the corner. His eyes were swollen shut, but he knew I was there. "Mike?" he rasped. "Yeah. I'm here." He started crying. It sounded wet and painful. "They took everything. My watch, my laptop. They said they'd come back." "Who, Greg?" "Bookies. Loan sharks. I don't know." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I spoke. "The lawsuit stops, Greg. Now. You sign the papers Henderson drew up. You drop the elder abuse crap. You agree to the debt ledger being valid." He tried to argue, but he had no fight left. "What about the money?" "They'll kill me." "Here is the deal," I said. "I am not selling the land. I am not selling the shop. But I will buy out your share of the house. We sell the house, I take my half, you take your half. But I deduct the $200,000 you owed Dad from your half of the residue estate, whatever is left. Maybe $50,000. You give to these sharks and you get out of town." "That's not enough," he whimpered. "It's all you're getting. And you're going to sign a document saying you waive all future claims to the business and the insurance policy. Or I walk out, I let Henderson crush you in court, and you go to jail for the burglary at the shop. I have the video, Greg. I kept the hoodie I found in your car when I came here. It has lacquer on the sleeve." I was bluffing about the hoodie. I hadn't looked in his car. But he didn't know that. He signed. It took another week to finalize everything. The lawsuit is dropped with prejudice. I am officially the sole owner of the business entity. The land is still technically co-owned for now, But we have a binding settlement agreement that I will pay him a fixed monthly amount for 10 years to buy out his equity in the dirt, effectively acting as his landlord until I own it. The house sold fast. The market is hot. After the debts to the estate were reconciled, Dad's ledger, Greg walked away with about $45,000. He took the check and left. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't visit Dad's grave. He just got in his beat-up car and drove west. I haven't heard from him since. I'm sitting in the shop right now. The smell of sawdust is the best smell in the world. The guys are working. The machines are humming. I kept Dad's drafting table raw. I didn't restain it. I like seeing the scars in the wood. It reminds me that we survived. So, am I the asshole? Maybe. I played hardball with my own brother while he was down. I used his debts and his desperation against him. But I saved the business. I saved 15 jobs. And I saved the legacy Dad built with his bare hands. I think Dad would be okay with that. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I'm going back to work. Hi there, if you made it so far. Consider dropping a like and maybe subscribing. Thanks. And have a nice one.